Alright, so here's our final lesson on World War One, the Treaty of Versailles. So what we learned today: what did the Allies want at the Treaty of Versailles? What was Germany's punishment? What are reparations? And what was the League of Nations? Here's a picture of Versailles today. Beautiful palace built by Louis XIV to help control the nobles, and they're in the heart of France and the 17th century. Beautiful gold ceilings, gorgeous chandeliers. Alright, here's the picture of the delegates at the Versailles Conference in 1919. So why Versailles? Why are they meeting here? Well, the French want to crush Germany in the same place where Bismarck formed it in 1871. Okay? So there are the big three are the three main people that represent the pretty much the Allies at the conference. So we have David Lloyd George of Great Britain, Georges Clemenceau of France, and Woodrow Wilson of the United States. Even though there were 39 nations at the conference, all the important decisions are going to be made by these three. They're the three strongest Allied powers: the United States, Great Britain, and France. So, American President Woodrow Wilson. So, Wilson wants a peace without victory. He wants defeated nations to be able to be treated well. That way, there's not a war in the future for revenge. He's also going to introduce America's goals, which are known as his 14 points, which the Germans admired, but the other allies thought it was stupid. And Wilson is hoping to eliminate the basic causes of war, such as conflicts over nationalism and imperialism, which a lot of the things Wilson wants are not going to be given until after World War II. Wilson is also going to call for an end to alliances and a reduction of military arms, and what's known as self-determination. Self-determination is the idea that the peoples of Eastern Europe would choose their own form of government. And Wilson is going to argue for the freedom of the seas and the formation of the League of Nations. And the League of Nations is a group of countries with the goal of settling disputes through negotiation rather than war. Alright, French Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau. He was complete opposite of Wilson. He was called the Tiger for his fierce war policy. And Clemenceau wants to crush the Germans so hard that they're never able to invade France again. He thought that Wilson was soft and told him that Wilson has 14 points, God Almighty only has 10. So, he may be right, but he was very harsh. He wanted Germany to suffer. And they will. British Prime Minister David Lloyd George. He has a middle position. He wants Germany to suffer, but he also doesn't want another war to happen in the future. And while he promises to make the Germans pay, he knows that destroying Germany is not good for Europe. He worked out many of the compromises in the treaty, helped keep the peace between him and Wilson, or between Wilson and Clemenceau. Alright, punishing the Central Powers. Here's what is going to come out of the treaty. For Germany, the treaty can be remembered as brat, or brat. So 1. Germany has to accept the blame for starting the war in the form of a war guilt clause. And the Allied and associated governments affirm that Germany accepts responsibility of Germany and her allies for causing all the loss and damage to which the Allied and associated governments and their nationals have been subjugated as a consequence of the war imposed on them by the aggression of Germany and her allies. This is from the Treaty of Versailles, Article 231. Germany had to pay over $33 billion in reparations, which is the R, or fines. The reparations covered here the destruction caused by the war, pensions for millions of Allied soldiers, widows, and families. Soldiers are going to go home and they're not going to receive pensions for fighting in the war. And Germany is going to go into depression, and they're going to suffer during the 1920s. Germany is now forbidden to have an army over 100,000 men. No submarines, no air force. And then finally, Germany lost territory and colonies to Britain and France. Alsace-Lorraine, which had originally belonged to France, will be given back to them. And the land, well, they lost land. We see the creation of the country of Poland, and the Rhineland is going to be occupied by Allied troops. Okay, so that here we have the brat. So B is blame, reparations is the R, army for not being able to have a large one, and T, loss of territory. All right, quick review. So we have David Lloyd George, Treaty of Versailles, Clemenceau. All right, Europe before 1919. All right, this is what it looked like. Here's what it looks like after. We'll see we got Poland, a new country, Czechoslovakia, Austria and Hungary, Yugoslavia, Romania, and Bulgaria. The industrial linemen will be occupied by Allied troops for 15 years, this area here, until Hitler kicks them out. Germany lost Alsace-Lorraine, North Schleswig, and the Polish corridor. So the Austro-Hungarian Empire is going to be broken up into 4 new nations: Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and Yugoslavia. Serbia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Montenegro make up Yugoslavia. Austria will be deprived of its entire empire and become a small nation. Their ally Romania is going to gain land, while Central Power Bulgaria lost land. Here's the partition of Hungary in 1919. The weak Ottoman Empire, which is going to be renamed Turkey, was also broken up. Some of the territories are given independence, while others, such as Palestine, which is not Palestine, Palestine is what it's called, Iraq, and Syria, are given over to Britain and France. Communist Russia. Since Russia's communist government left the war early, they were not invited to Versailles. The Allies want to weaken Russia to keep communism from spreading westward. And so 4 new nations gain independence from Russia: Finland, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Russia also lost land to Poland and Romania. Romania grew after this war. All right, so here's the Europe after Treaty of Versailles. Here's the land Russia lost. Wilson's creation, the League of Nations. Wilson succeeded in forming the League of Nations, and the countries that joined the League promised to take cooperative economic and military actions against any aggressive country. Even though Wilson created it, the United States reject the League because they feel that it will pull America into future European wars, and the United States want to stay neutral, go back to being neutral. The United States doesn't like the way they've been treated, especially Wilson, the way they treated Wilson. And the fact is, it's really sad because they would have lost the war if the Americans had not shown up if they had not declared war in 1917. Plus, the lack of the U.S. severely weakened the League. It becomes useless. It eventually dissolves before World War II even starts. Anger over Versailles. A lot of nations are ticked off with the Treaty of Versailles. They thought their goals have not been achieved. Germany was upset by the reparations, the reduced military and territorial losses. Americans thought the treaty was too harsh on Germany, and the U.S. Congress refused to approve it. We never accepted the Treaty of Versailles. Wilson went home angry. Italy wanted to gain more land from Austria than it received. Japan was upset because it thought that the Allies did not recognize all of its claims to China after the war. China was angry that Japan had been given Germany's sphere of influence. Russia was angry that they were not invited to Versailles, and they are ticked off after losing Finland, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. But sadly, The treaty that was supposed to end all wars becomes the main motivation for starting World War II. 20 years, less than exactly 20 years later. Okay, 1939 is when World War II begins. All right, so that's the end of our World War One unit. Um, and next week we will be diving into the America during the 20s. Thank you for paying attention.